So, imagine this. A peace so total, so absolute, it lasts for 2.5 centuries. We're talking generations born and raised without ever seeing a war. Now, what if I told you that peace was bought with an act of cruelty so unbelievable, the man behind it was literally called a demon? Well, buckle up, because this is the story of how one man burned a country to the ground just to save it. Okay, let's start with the end result, because it's almost too wild to believe. After one of the most violent periods in its entire history, Japan just enters this period of peace, and it lasts for 250 years. To put that in perspective, that's longer than the United States has even existed. It was an era of stability, incredible art and culture, and that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth do you slam the brakes on an endless cycle of war so completely? The answer is, well, it's deeply unsettling. It was achieved with fire, with the complete, and I mean utter, annihilation of every single obstacle. And to really understand how such a brutal act could lead to such a lasting peace, we've got to go back and see the world that created this man. All right, we're heading back to 16th century Japan. This is the Sengoku period, which translates to the Warring States period. And let me tell you, that name is a massive understatement. For a solid 100 years, the country was just tearing itself apart. You had these powerful warlords of the daimyo constantly fighting over every scrap of land and influence. It was just a perpetual meat grinder of a war, and there was no end in sight. But who was really keeping the fires of this conflict burning? Now, you're probably thinking of samurai lords and shoguns, and yeah, you're right, they were a huge part of it. But there was another power, a hidden power, that was constantly tipping the scales, making sure no single leader could ever actually win. And trust me, it is not who you'd expect. The great Buddhist monasteries. And listen, these were not just quiet places for prayer. No, these were military superpowers. They had their own armies, gigantic fortress-like temples, and they controlled more land than most of the warlords. In every single conflict, they'd pick a side, funneling money and soldiers, making sure the war never ever ended. They made peace totally impossible. And then came Oda Nobunaga. He was a brilliant, ruthless, and unbelievably ambitious warlord who saw the one thing everyone else was missing. The trying to negotiate and compromise had failed for 100 years straight. So he decided, you know what, we're trying something different. Not negotiation, annihilation. His target was the ultimate symbol of the warrior monk's power, the sacred Mount Hiei, home to this massive temple complex. So in 1571, he surrounds the entire mountain with his army. His orders were terrifyingly simple: leave no one alive. In a single night, his army just swept up the mountain and burned everything. Every temple, every library, every single sacred building. Over 3,000 structures were just turned to ash. 1,000 years of religious history and culture just gone. And the human cost? It was even more staggering. His soldiers killed everyone they found. Warrior monks, yes, but also scholars, priests, women, children. An estimated 20,000 people were slaughtered. This wasn't a battle, it was an extermination. The news sent an absolute shockwave across Japan. He wasn't just a conqueror anymore. To so many people, even some of his own allies, he had become a devil, the demon king of the sixth heaven. But Nobunaga, he did not care. He didn't care because he wasn't interested in being loved. He was interested in one thing: results. And the results of this one horrific act were immediate, and they would change the course of Japanese history forever. The message he sent was brutally clear. Faced with what happened at Mount Hiei, every other powerful monastery just surrendered. Instantly, they laid down their weapons. The religious powers that had fueled a century of war were broken in a single night. And with them out of the way, Nobunaga's path to unifying Japan was wide open. So the immediate effect was the end of all this religious warfare. But the long-term effect, well, it was something nobody in Japan had seen in their entire lifetime. Peace! The unification that Nobunaga started, which his successors finished, ushered in what's known as the Edo period. 250 years of stability, the longest single period of peace in the entire history of Japan, all of it built on the ashes of Mount Hiei. I mean, the contrast here could not be more stark. For 100 years, leaders tried talking, they tried compromise, and what did they get? 100 years of war. Nobunaga chose absolute, total victory through unthinkable cruelty, and the result was 2.5 centuries of peace. It's an incredibly difficult equation to even look at. So how do we even process a guy like this? Is he a monster? A savior? A monster who somehow became a savior? This was a question that Nobunaga himself seemed to have a pretty clear answer for. Yeah, when he was confronted about his actions, this was his legendary reply. He wasn't asking for forgiveness from some god. He wasn't pretending to be a holy man. He was just him, a man of action, living in the real world. His philosophy was crystal clear. Judge me by what I accomplish, not by your morals. He believed that the goal, a lasting peace, was so important that it justified any means necessary to get there. You know that old question, do the ends justify the means? For Nobunaga, the answer was a loud, resounding yes. He actually never got to see that long peace he created. He was betrayed by one of his own generals and died when he was just 49. But in a weird way, it didn't even matter. The wheel of history had already been turned. The foundation for peace was set, and it was cemented by his brutality. Which leaves us with this huge, haunting question that just echoes through history. Can a true and lasting peace ever be built on a foundation of absolute, merciless cruelty? Nobunaga's story gives us one chilling and, you have to admit, remarkably successful answer. What do you think?